Hi, and welcome to Drupal Brief. This is an AI-generated brief of another video, podcast, or blog post. If you want to learn more about what's being discussed here, then please go check out the source. This podcast is produced by the team at Drupal Forge. We would love to create more AI-generated briefs like this. Please contact Salim Lakhani on Drupal Slack or LinkedIn and let him know what else you want us to cover. Oh, and if you have not tried Drupal Forge yet, you're missing out. You'll be able to do twice as much in half the time. So go check it out. Okay, that's it. Make sure to click subscribe. And here we go.
Welcome to another deep dive with us. You know we love digging into how different organizations use tech to tell their stories, and today we're going behind the scenes at the Urban Institute.
Ooh, the Urban Institute.
Yeah, it's a pretty big think tank, and they do some really interesting work on social and economic policy.
Okay, interesting.
So they have this massive web presence to get their research out there, right? And we're going to look at how they use Drupal.
Okay.
Drupal, yeah. It's this open source platform that a lot of people use to build websites. The Urban Institute, they've actually got over 20 websites all running on Drupal.
Whoa, 20 websites. That's a lot.
Yeah, right. And it's all hosted on Pantheon.
Pantheon, okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with Pantheon, but it's this super robust hosting platform.
Gotcha. Okay, so they've got all these websites on Drupal, and it's all hosted on Pantheon.
Exactly. And get this, we're talking hundreds of individual sites in total.
Wow, hundreds. What do you mean by individual sites?
Well, think about it. Think about all the different projects and initiatives the Urban Institute has going on.
Yeah, makes sense.
They probably have microsites for each one, right? To showcase their research and data.
Right, so it's not just 20 big websites, it's like a whole network of sites all connected.
Exactly, a whole digital ecosystem. And it's all powered by Drupal. Pretty cool.
Yeah, that's impressive. So what's so special about Drupal? Why would they choose that over any other platform?
Well, the fact that it's open source is a huge plus.
Okay, open source. So what does that mean exactly? For someone who might be thinking about building their own website, why would they care if it's open source or not?
It basically means the code is freely available. You're not stuck with some proprietary software that dictates what you can and can't do.
Okay, so more freedom.
Exactly. You can customize Drupal to your heart's content. Plus, there's this huge community of developers who are constantly improving and supporting it.
Kind of like having a built-in tech support team.
Yeah, pretty much. And did I mention that open source often means cheaper?
Oh, cheaper is always good. So it sounds like Drupal is a pretty powerful tool, especially for an organization like the Urban Institute.
Yeah.
But who's the person behind the scenes, making sure all this Drupal magic actually happens?
Right. So we actually got to talk to Jerry T., a content producer at the Urban Institute. He's been there for 17 years?
17 years, wow. He must have seen it all.
He has, from the early days of hand-coding HTML to now, where he's using these super sophisticated Drupal tools.
So what exactly does a content producer do at a place like the Urban Institute?
That's a good question. It's not just about uploading blog posts, right?
Right.
He's kind of like the conductor of this whole digital orchestra, making sure everything runs smoothly and that the content is top-notch.
Okay, I like that analogy. So he's bringing together all the different pieces, research data, all of that, making sure it gets presented in a way that's engaging and informative.
Exactly. He's going to work with researchers, designers, data visualization people, you name it.
So it's a pretty collaborative role, it sounds like.
Super collaborative. And let me tell you, it's not always easy. We're talking tight deadlines, lots of stakeholders to keep happy.
Right, that sounds stressful.
Yeah, he definitely has to be a problem solver.
So how does he do that?
Well, we heard this great story about how he used the rabbit hole module in Drupal to fix a broken link. Apparently, it saved the dev team a ton of time.
The rabbit hole module, what is that?
So it's basically a tool that lets you create redirects super easily.
Oh, I see. So if a page gets moved or deleted, he can just redirect people to the right place without needing to involve a developer.
Exactly. It's a pretty clever workaround, right?
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. It sounds like he's really good at thinking outside the box and finding solutions.
He is. And it's a good thing, too, because, content production has changed a lot in the past 17 years.
Oh, yeah, for sure. 17 years ago, we were still using dial-up internet.
Right. And Jerry was hand-coding everything in Dreamweaver.
Wow, hand-coding. That sounds tedious.
Very tedious. Can you imagine? Every little change you wanted to make, you had to go into the code and, tweak it by hand.
No, thank you. So how does he handle content entry now? Surely Drupal has made things A bit easier.
Way easier. Now he uses this tool called Layout Builder.
Layout Builder, okay.
It's a visual tool that basically lets you drag and drop elements to create layouts.
So no more hand coding.
Not for the basic stuff, at least.
Wow, that's a game changer. So he's gone from like typing out every line of code to just dragging and dropping elements.
Exactly. It's a whole new world. And it's made things so much more efficient.
Yeah, that's going to free up a lot of his time to like focus on the actual content.
Absolutely. But even with these amazing tools, there are still challenges, right? Especially when you're dealing with complex content models like they have at the Urban Institute.
Content models. Okay, now you're talking my language. What exactly do you mean by content models? Like, how does that work in the real world?
Right. So a content model is basically a blueprint for like how all your content is structured and organized.
So like a framework.
Yeah, exactly. So you might have different content types like blog posts, research reports, data visualizations.
Okay, so different categories for different types of content.
Right. And each type has its own set of fields and rules.
Okay, so like a template for each type of content. That makes sense. So what kind of challenges does that create?
Well, even with these like well-defined templates, things can get tricky. Imagine trying to connect authors to specific publications or automatically adjusting the layout based on the content type. It can get pretty complex.
Yeah, I see how that could be a headache. So how does Jerry deal with all that complexity?
Yeah, it really can. I bet he wishes he had more control over things on the like back end of the website, so he can make those tweaks himself.
Right, without like breaking everything and having to call in a developer every 5 minutes.
Exactly. He talked about wanting more control over the like CSS styling. Oh, the CSS. Yeah, the stuff that controls like the fonts and colors and all that.
Exactly. He's like, imagine being able to tweak those things without having to bug a developer every time.
That makes sense, right? It's kind of like, if you think about it, you're given this like beautifully decorated room,
Okay.
but you can't move the furniture around.
Yeah, I get that.
It's frustrating. You want to be able to like personalize things a bit.
Totally. And speaking of design,
Yeah.
the Urban Institute has this whole design system, right? It's called Linden.
Linden,
yeah.
yeah.
And it's all about creating this like consistent visual identity across all their websites.
Okay, so everything looks and feels cohesive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're big on this component-based approach using something called atomic design principles.
Atomic design. Okay, that sounds kind of intimidating. What's that all about?
It's actually pretty simple. Imagine like building with Legos.
Legos.
Yeah. So they have these pre-designed elements, buttons, headings, image blocks, and they can be assembled in different ways to create layouts.
So it's like they have this big box of Lego pieces and they can just mix and match them to build different pages.
Exactly. And that saves a ton of time and effort.
I bet. And it probably helps with consistency too, right?
Oh, absolutely. It ensures everything looks and feels like it belongs together. And these components are packaged into Drupal modules.
Oh.
So there's one called Urban Blocks that integrates with Layout Builder.
So Jerry can basically just drag and drop these pre-approved components to build pages.
Yep, pretty much.
That's pretty slick. But I'm guessing there are times when he needs something that's like not in the standard set of Legos.
Right, like he needs a piece in a different shape or color.
Exactly. So what happens then?
That's when things get interesting. Sometimes he can like find a workaround within the existing system, or he might have to advocate for a new component to be added to the design system.
I see. So it's this balance between like working within the constraints and pushing for things to evolve.
Exactly. He mentioned that he often bounces ideas off Josh, the lead developer, to find the best solutions.
Sounds like a good team.
Yeah, they seem to have a good collaborative vibe going on.
And it makes sense, right? You need that open communication between the designers and the developers.
Oh, for sure. And it also highlights the importance of community involvement, even for non-developers like Jerry.
Okay. What do you mean by community involvement, like contributing to the open source community?
Exactly. Or attending events like DrupalCon, the big Drupal conference.
Oh, yeah, DrupalCon. I've heard about that.
It's a great place to like learn about the latest developments, connect with other Drupal users, and share best practices.
Okay, so it's not just for hardcore coders.
No, not at all. Jerry said he actually seeks out sessions that are specifically for content producers, like practical tips and tricks.
So it's like a giant knowledge sharing hub.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it's cool because, he's not just passively consuming information.
Right.
He's actively engaging with the community and bringing back those learnings to the Urban Institute.
Oh, that's awesome. Did he ever mention anything specific he learned at DrupalCon that, like, really stuck with him?
He talked about attending a session about managing content for a large hospital system. And he was like, wow, this is so relevant to my work.
That's amazing. I love that. It's like, even though the organizations are completely different, the challenges and solutions can be so similar.
Totally. And it just goes to show how powerful it is to like share your experiences and learn from others.
For sure. Now, going back to Jerry's desire for more control on the back end, did he ever mention any plans to, like, contribute to Drupal's development himself?
You know, he actually expressed interest in getting involved with the development of Drupal's Experience Builder.
The Experience Builder, what's that?
It's like the next generation of Drupal's content editing tools.
Oh, wow. So he could actually have a hand in shaping the future of Drupal.
Exactly. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
He could bring a content producer's perspective to the table.
Right. Like, highlight the pain points that content creators experience and advocate for features that would make their lives easier.
Yeah, it's all about bridging that gap between the developers and the content creators.
And making sure the tools are not only powerful, but also user-friendly.
Exactly. So, speaking of usability, let's dive a little deeper into the nitty-gritty of content modeling at the Urban Institute.
Okay, let's get into the weeds. Tell me more about those 12 different publication types and how they manage all that.
Yeah, so remember those 12 different publication types? Policy briefs, blog posts, data visualizations, all that.
Oh, yeah, all those different formats. It sounds like a nightmare to organize.
Well, Jerry said one of the biggest challenges was figuring out how to like structure all those different types within Drupal.
Yeah, I bet. Did they end up creating like a separate content type for each one?
You could do that, but it can get really messy. Imagine having 12 different content types with all their own fields and settings.
Oh my gosh, yeah. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Right. So they decided to go a different route.
Okay, how'd they handle it?
They used a single content type for all the publications.
Wait, really? Just one?
Yeah, but they used fields to differentiate between the types. So there's like a publication type field where you can select blog post or research report or whatever.
That's actually pretty clever. It's like having one big bucket for all your publications, but you can still sort them out by type.
Exactly. Keeps things a bit more organized. But then, of course, you run into the whole layout issue.
Right, because a blog post and a research report, they're probably going to look pretty different, right?
Totally. And this is where, like, the limitations of the current layout builder kind of come in.
Okay, so what would Jerry like to see? Like, what's his dream scenario?
Well, ideally, he'd love to be able to, like, select a specific layout template based on the publication type.
That makes sense. So a blog post could automatically get, like, a 2-column layout with a sidebar.
Right, and a research report could have a more formal single-column layout.
Yeah, it would save so much time, and it would ensure that everything looks consistent.
Exactly. And, you know, Josh, the developer, actually acknowledged that this is something they're working on improving in Drupal.
Oh, that's great to hear. So it sounds like Drupal's evolving to meet the needs of content creators like Jerry.
Yeah, definitely. This whole idea of having, like, templated layouts would be a game changer.
Totally. It would free up so much time and mental energy for the content creators to actually, create content.
Exactly. And it ties into this bigger concept that Josh mentioned, content as deployment.
Content as deployment. Okay, now you've piqued my curiosity. What in the world does that mean?
It's kind of a radical idea, but basically it's about making the process of publishing content, like, way more streamlined.
So instead of waiting for a developer to, like, push code changes every time you want to update a sentence or swap out an image?
Yeah, imagine being able to deploy your content changes directly.
Oh, wow. So no more waiting around for someone else to make those updates.
Right. Content creators would have so much more control and flexibility.
That sounds like a dream come true, especially for someone like Jerry who's always looking for ways to work more efficiently.
Totally.
Yeah.
But of course, there are some, like, technical hurdles to overcome before we get there.
Yeah, I can imagine. A website as complex as the Urban Institute's, it's got to be tricky to make those kinds of changes.
Josh said it's like trying to turn a cruise ship on a dime.
It's a pretty good analogy. But hey, you never know, right? With all the cool stuff happening with Drupal's Experience Builder and the Starshot initiative.
Yeah, it might not be that far off.
Fingers crossed. Well, this has been a fascinating glimpse into the world of Drupal content production. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up?
I think the key takeaway here is that even with a powerful platform like Drupal, there's always room for improvement, right? And it's amazing to see how the community is constantly pushing those boundaries, figuring out how to make things better for content creators like Jerry.
Absolutely. It's inspiring to see people like Jerry not only using Drupal to do their work, but also actively shaping its future. It really shows the power of open source and community collaboration.
Wouldn't said it better myself. So for our listeners out there, how might this whole content as deployment idea change the way you think about your own website?
Yeah, great question. Food for thought as you all continue on your own Drupal journeys. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
All right. What did you think? Did the AI-generated thing work for you? Let us know. Anyway, to close off this podcast, I just wanted to remind you that this brief was a fully AI-generated summary, and we take no credit for the original content. If you want more AI-generated summaries like this, then let us know. Contact Salim Lakhani on Drupal Slack or LinkedIn. By the way, we're automating the entire process from start to finish, so these briefs can be generated hands-free and on schedule. You want something else covered? We're happy to do it for you. This brief was brought to you by Drupal Forge. Drupal Forge is the new #1 platform to try, demo, and develop Drupal sites, and it is completely free to use. It is a community-supported nonprofit platform run by volunteers, just like yourself. Come join us.